Hey gamers, this is Chris Bolt, and I'm going to be coming in with what I think is probably going to be my last video on Ghost of Yotei, because frankly, I don't think anybody is really going to be talking about this game after this week. This game has pretty much hit the wall and has nowhere else to go but down. There's been various reports coming out that Sony has decided to go ahead and pull back on advertising money for this game because they don't want to be supporting a game that is collapsing. In fact, let me go ahead and pull that story up right here. It's from That Park Place. Here's the article from That Park Place. Rumor, Ghost of Yotei ads quickly scaled back by Sony Japan due to collapsing sales. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the sales figures of anything like that, but there is something coming from Endymion. And he has a tweet over here stating that he has Ghost of Yotei's numbers and that it's bleak. So he's making a video and probably going to be posted tomorrow. We'll definitely check that out, and I hope you guys check that out too, because I think it's going to be a very important video. Pretty much, the writing for this game was on the wall way back when this game was first announced. And I think it was announced back in 2023, I believe, when this game debuted. At the time, everybody was expecting Ghost of Tsushima 2. And once again, if anybody says anything differently, they're being dishonest, because no one had heard of Ghost of Yotei or this character Atsu. It turned out, once it was announced, everybody was dumbfounded and taken aback by the announcement. Some people basically were like, oh, I'm not going to be playing this game because I wanted to finish Jin Sakai's story. That's someone like me. Other people, like Tyrone Magnus, were taking a wait-and-see approach, and I think Az from Hill vs. Babyface also took a wait-and-see approach, said, hey, we don't have enough information to know as of yet as to what direction this game is going to be going in. But as time went on, and as people got to know more about this actress that plays the role of Atsu, Erika Ishii, people didn't like where it was going. And then on top of that, after the assassination of the late Charlie Kirk, and when one of the directors came out and started mocking him and making fun of him, more people just said, hey, I'm not going to be playing this game at all. So the audience for this particular game was already diminishing once it was announced, but it just got worse and worse over time. And I was looking at Tyrone Magnus' video earlier about the same article over here talking about the sales, and he basically said that he was getting inundated by retweets, X retweets, or whatever you want to call them, about the ending of Ghost of Yotei. And spoiler for those of you who don't know, Atsu ends up with some chick raising her late brother's daughter. So it is another situation where it's a lesbian couple raising a child, similar to the ending of Last of Us Part 2. And so he basically said, nope, I don't want to play that because I'm tired of dealing with woke games. Me personally, it being woke had nothing to do with me wanting to play the game. It all had to do with the fact that Jin Sakai's story was shortchanged. And I have a lot of people that's been responding to my own videos trying to justify that Jin Sakai's story was told and it was time to move on. These are people that are trying to cope. And I'm going to just go out and say it right now. If you're trying to cope, you're trying to convince yourselves that the game that you really wanted was Ghost of Yotei, when in fact the game that you wanted all this time was Ghost of Tsushima, and you're trying to rationalize that decision of supporting Ghost of Yotei by trying to convince yourselves that Jin Sakai's story was finished, when in fact the ending to the game, as I showed in my last video, the ending to the game basically said it is open to a sequel. I showed you guys the IGN video that showed the two different scenarios depending upon which choice you made, whether or not to save your uncle or kill your uncle. That determined what ending you got. But regardless of what ending you got, Jin Sakai continued his fight against the Mongols, and in the one where he actually spared his uncle, Yuna actually sided with him to go ahead and continue his fight. So the story could have easily been told. And anyone who says otherwise, once again, you're just trying to cope with the reality that Ghost of Yotei is not the game that you were promised or wanted. And that brings me to this review from SkillUp. Now, SkillUp is quite possibly one of the preeminent games journalists that's on YouTube. He's had over 1 million subscribers. His reputation is beyond reproach. On some political issues, I may not agree with him, but I don't really listen to him for his political issues. I listen to him for his gaming takes, and his gaming takes have, for the most part, been spot on. And he did a review of Ghost of Yotei, and I'm not going to play the entire review, but I will link it in the description if you want to go ahead and watch that, and I highly do recommend you watch that. But he doesn't drop the lead about his feelings about this particular game, and it's gonna mirror this particular article that I had mentioned in my last video. I'm worried Ghost of Yotei will continue PlayStation sequel problem over here at comicbook.com by Justin Joy. But before I do get into Skill Up's video, do make sure you like, share, subscribe, turn on those post notifications. All that stuff really does help me out. And without further ado, let me go ahead and just play the beginning. That's all I'm going to play, and then I'll come right back on over.
In 2020, I basically awarded Ghost of Tsushima my personal game of the year. And I say basically because the game sat a little awkwardly at the top of my list. What I said back then was that when it comes to a game of the year list, I put a big premium on innovation, and Ghost of Tsushima wasn't really innovative per se. Instead, it was an incredibly refined version of the open world formula that we've been playing throughout most of the 2010s, and so it felt more iterative than breakthrough. That didn't stop it from being a phenomenal game, mind you. In fact, it was so good that one of the other things I said in that Game of the Year video is that I think this particular spin on the open world formula, this map marker driven AAA Ubisoft inspired cinematic open world action game, Ghost of Tsushima essentially perfected that formula to the point where there was nowhere else for it to go. On that basis, I was really hopeful that developers would begin to reimagine the foundations of this genre so they could push new frontiers and deliver us something we hadn't experienced before, rather than another version of a game we've played dozens of times now. Ghost of Yotei is exactly what I had pleaded for Sucker Punch to not make. It's Ghost of Tsushima again, but with better visuals and a way worse story. We'll do the full review, don't worry, but that really is the strapline. If you've played Ghost of Tsushima, you have already played this. With how central storytelling is in these sorts of open world games, I came away from Yotei feeling not a lot of love for it, despite it being a pretty phenomenal game in terms of its visuals, technical polish, and combat. If that sounds like a pretty searing indictment of the game, I don't really mean it to be. I'm not here all indignant being like, this is outrageous. It's more just like, I don't really feel anything towards this. All of it.
And so you heard right there, I didn't feel anything towards this because Skill Up is exactly correct. Ghost of Yotei is nothing but an asset flip. And you see the open worlds that we have right here, and you saw the trajectory right here. This right here, this is the exact same animation for when Jin Sakai throws out his grappling hook and swings. The exact same animation. The combat, the exact same animation. The traversal, the exact same animation. The wind, the way it blows, is the exact same animation. Is it prettier? Yes, but it is still the exact same game as Skill Up had said. In fact, we'll just even go right here with the way you pick up flowers. You just run by and you just pick it up. You climb, the way you climb, it's the exact same how you climb. So there's nothing innovative there. So for this particular game, what it needed was not an innovation in terms of gameplay or traversal, because as Skill Up said, this Ghost of Tsushima is the pinnacle of all that open world that's been introduced to us by companies like Ubisoft, like from Nintendo, all those kinds of places. This was the pinnacle. Ghost of Tsushima was the pinnacle of all of that. So the innovation would have to come from somewhere else, and that innovation would have to be in the story. And you heard Skill Up say that the story for Ghost of Yotei is actually worse than Ghost of Tsushima, and that's exactly correct, because going back over here to the article from comicbook.com, as we said about Last of Us Part 2, a story that is focused on violence and revenge. It's one of the laziest methods of storytelling. That is what we got here with Ghost of Yotei. Now, if you guys like Ghost of Yotei, that is fine. I'm happy for you. I'm happy that you're enjoying the game. but you cannot be dishonest about sitting here saying that Ghost of Yotei is somehow better than Ghost of Tsushima in any way, shape, or form. And that brings me to the last thing that I want to point out right here. This is from a Radic on X/Twitter. He says he's 30 hours into Ghost of Yotei and enough time has passed that he sits here and says that Ghost of Yotei is greater than Ghost of Tsushima. That is complete and utter bullshit. And I state it as such by my response to him. I'm 0 hours in and know this take is shit. That is absolutely correct. I don't need to play Ghost of Yotei. More than enough reputable sources that I follow and that I respect have played this game and have come to the same conclusion. Whether or not you like the game or you dislike the game or you're indifferent about the game, they're all saying the exact same thing, that Ghost of Yotei has done little in terms of innovation from Ghost of Tsushima, and that Ghost of Yotei's story is far worse than Ghost of Tsushima's. And some people in here were trying to say that Jin Sakai was not a compelling character or anything like that. Okay, you're entitled to that opinion that he's not a compelling character, but his story was compelling. He is a compelling character. That's why we still talk about him to this day. That's why we still compare Ghost of Yotei to Ghost of Tsushima. That's how much this game has impressed everyone. As you heard Skill Up say, it was his game of the year in 2020. And at the time, gamers at the Game Awards, we selected Ghost of Tsushima to be game of the year over Last of Us Part 2. Those two were in contention with each other. The Game Awards decided to go ahead and give Neil Druckmann his little trophy, but all of us gamers know Ghost of Tsushima was where it's at. We still talk about Ghost of Tsushima to this day. We don't say a damn word about Last of Us Part 2 other than to lament the fact of how Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog treated Joel in that game. Last of Us Part 2 has become a complete and utter laughingstock, and I highly doubt there will ever be a Last of Us 3 because they've painted themselves into a corner. Everybody cared more about Joel than Ellie. They've written the story in such a fashion that no one cares about Ellie, no one cares about Abby. So the only way they're going to be able to advance in Last of Us 3 is if they come up with a new compelling character that is as compelling as Joel. And the same thing is happening here with Ghost of Tsushima. Sucker punched themselves. They have written themselves into a corner. They didn't finish Ghost of Tsushima. They didn't finish Jin Sakai's story. They instead shortchanged it by saying, oh, it's 300 years into the future, and gave us Atsu, which nobody cares for. But if you're one of the people that does like her, you are in the minority. Nobody cares for this character. The sales are allegedly collapsing. The advertising for the game is being scaled back. Going over here, and Demian says the numbers look bleak. I can't wait to see what that video looks like and everything. Let me give that a like there. And it's going on back over here to Skill Up. It's a far worse game. Well, I shouldn't say that. He didn't say it's a far worse game. Those are my words. It's a game that is subpar compared to its predecessor. So unfortunately, I don't think there's anywhere else that we can take this series Ghost of Yotei, predominantly because unlike Ghost of Tsushima, this game does have a complete ending. Two lesbian women are going to be raising another man's child. That's the ending. That's it. It's unlike with Ghost of Tsushima, where Jin Sakai was still alive and he still had sworn an oath that he would drive the Mongolians out of Japan. So now, once again, Sucker Punch has painted itself into a corner, and as far as this series, it's another dead series that Sony has no one to blame but themselves. It's kind of funny. I know there's supposed to be a Spider-Man 3, but they're going to have to figure out a way to do Spider-Man 3 because the way Spider-Man 2 ended was that Peter Parker was going to hang it up and Miles Morales was going to take over. Ain't nobody gonna go for that. Ain't nobody gonna go for Miles Morales replacing Peter Parker as Spider-Man. Miles Morales is Miles Morales and Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Same with the God of War. That'll be interesting how they try to approach God of War. A lot of people don't care for this mellowed out, depressed Kratos. I don't know how they're gonna how Sony and Santa Monica is gonna continue that story, because the way that one is open, is supposed to allegedly start going and messing around with the Egyptian gods. I don't know how you're gonna be able to work with that. Horizon Forbidden West, I don't know the ending to that or anything. I put a couple of hours in, but then after a while I just said this is another asset flip. There's no innovation. Getting a glider is not innovation. They turned Aloy into a lesbian, despite the fact in Horizon Zero Dawn there was supposed to be some type of budding relationship there between her and the black dude that was off in the game. Not the one that was played by Lance Reddick, rest in peace, but the younger guy. We all know who I'm talking about. Don't know how they're going to continue that story. And now here we are faced again with Ghost of Tsushima and Ghost of Yotei, wondering how Sucker Punch is going to finish this story. Sony, you fucked yourself over so many times. I hope you guys learned your lesson here. Stop messing around with your franchises and turning them over to activists who care more about their activism and pushing the message more than they care about delivering competent games with compelling story. But those are my thoughts on the issue. What do you guys think about all this? Jump down in the comments, let me know what you think, and make sure you guys do like, share, subscribe, turn on the post notifications. All that stuff really does help me out. And remember, this is Chris Boat signing off, and I will catch you guys in the next video. You guys take it easy.